So, you're going through divorce, you've got kids, you've got a partner or an ex-partner. What do you do? Hi, I'm Chris, I'm a doctor. I've read this book that's written by a US judge and I'll do my best to summarize it to help you through this difficult time. The one message I'd first like to make clear is that all cases are decided on what is best for the children, not what is best for the parents. Now, this chap who's called Justice Brownstone, who I think is a minor celeb in the USA because he's got some kind of TV gig as well, says that he seldom sees parents acting with maturity. And it's that maturity that the children actually need and deserve so they can resolve parenting differences and provide them with a proactive way forward, hopefully without court involvement. In essence, you'd want to avoid court as much as you can, and the book does recommend getting a lawyer. I've got my own views on that, but I think that it's extremely important to realize that this is a hopefully once in a lifetime thing that you're going through, and there are these highly paid specialists that can help navigate that process. And if you don't have a lawyer, particularly in America, you may put something in which is inadmissible and then later in court find out that you've wasted everybody's time and have also got the fees of the ex-partner's lawyer to pay. The other main benefit of a lawyer is that they can be objective. When you're in a particular situation, it may be very hard to be objective. Now remember, family courts are not actually in the business of rewarding or punishing anybody, even though often lots of litigants have this kind of win-lose mindset, I won, they lost and things. And sadly, misguided lawyers do as well at times have that light mindset. But really, there's no winners and there's no losers until the court closes, and when the fighting continues, everybody loses. Most importantly, the children lose. So what you don't want to do is have your children through unnecessary suffering by prolonging a court case. Now, parents will have this kind of mindset where they'll go to court, a bit like on TV, they tell their story and then there's a few questions and there it is, it's completed in 15 minutes. This is categorically not the case. Certainly not in the UK system, and according to this book, not in the US system either. It goes on for ages, and when it finally ends, it's not like anything actually changes. So bear that in mind. The central message of this book is that the process of litigation can be extremely damaging, because basically your children are caught in this tug of war between two parents who both may firmly believe that they're correct, and this can go on for months and if not years. And if you've got somebody who is then trying to turn children against the other parent, this is just damaging. Having children in the process hearing bickering and personal attacks and just obstructive tactics to try to undermine the other parent. So it's worth asking yourself a question. Can two parents who actually love their child allow a stranger to make crucial decisions about their child's living arrangements, health, education, extracurricular activities, vacation time, and the degree of contact with each parent? Clearly, the answer's no, but sadly, the answer is yes, because that's exactly what you're doing if you're taking your childcare custody battle to court. You're putting all of this in the hands of, in essence, a stranger. And why would you do that? Now, the central theme of this book, as I say, that's written by a judge, is to avoid court. And if you can be reasonable to yourself and to your ex-partner so that you can make adequate childcare arrangements that work for the children, you can save everybody a lot of unnecessary heartache, stress, and also cash. Now, judges seldom witness maturity in parents. What does maturity mean? Well, in this case, being mature is defined as caring enough about your children that will force you to deal in a civilized way with somebody that you may actually hate. It also means thinking twice and measuring your words carefully before you shoot your mouth off when you're upset with your ex-partner, especially in front of the children. It means actually insulating your children from this parental conflict so that they know your breakup has actually nothing to do with them. Maturity means doing what is necessary to make the transition in your children's lives as easy as possible for them. Being mature means putting your children's needs ahead of your own, and that's most important. It also means truly understanding and accepting that your children are entitled to be loved by both parents, and giving your child the emotional permission to express and receive that love from the other parent, even if you dislike each other. And it means being willing and able to reach compromises so that your children can have the peace that they deserve, rather than being caught in a tug of war which is about conflicts of loyalty. So let's say you wind up in court anyway. The task of the family court judge is actually trying to look forward. And sadly, most parents are looking back. Really, we want to construct going forward a good relationship or a functional relationship with both parents that works well for the children, and a co-parenting regime that's in the child's best interest or the children's best interest. Instead, there's lots of time that is just wasted in which people are saying they did this in the past and the other party is saying they did this. So the judge winds up spending precious time de-escalating the hostilities, trying to refocus parties away from the past to the future. Because regardless of the issues, if it's domestic abuse, or where a parent has a mental health problem, or perhaps a comorbid substance abuse problem, if a parent's conduct has exposed children to a risk of harm, neglect, or abuse, irrespective of what's happened, you still have to try to conduct yourself in a mature fashion when dealing with the ex-partner, because it's in the best interests of the children. And this doesn't mean being a pushover and giving the other parent what they want. That's particularly important. So what's wrong with court? I've mentioned it takes a long time and is stressful, but there's still this adversarial process in which winning may be the objective. So parents, instead of being on the same team, in fact, try and emphasize the shortcomings and failings of the other person and the life that occurred in that relationship. And if parents have a lawsuit having to deal with this, particularly if it goes on for many years, then this is just not good. And when it ends, it's unlikely the relationship will be amicable. Costs obviously are high, and another important thing to point out is that the judge may not agree with either parent. Coming back to my initial point about a stranger deciding, in essence, life goes on, but a stranger has decided and they may not have agreed with either parent. And courts generally try not to disrupt children's living arrangements and to maintain as much stability and consistency in their lives. Family courts judges make decisions by examining admissible evidence that has been presented and applying the balance of probability tests. This relates to America, but this test requires the judge to decide how much importance to attach to each item of evidence and then make findings of the fact based on the basis of what's most likely to be true. So if some allegation is considered more likely than not to be true, then on balance of probabilities, the fact will be accepted that it is true. So this is why you may recall O.J. Simpson, I believe, got acquitted for murder, but then in a family court, case was perceived that he had murdered somebody, because the level of evidence for criminal court is different. So, for example, if one parent accuses the other of hitting the child, the judge will review all the evidence and decide whether it is more likely than not that A, the child was hit, and B, the perpetrator was the parent in question. Proof on a balance of probabilities is not the same as this standard proof, the same standard of proof that's applied in a criminal court. Let me tell you how the cases end, usually with three things. One, a trial is actually held, which is very rare. Two, one or both parties actually withdraw the case, or they simply stop participating because they've abandoned it in essence. Usually because they've run out of cash or they're emotionally drained and have decided to give up. A third one is that the parties have negotiated a resolution to the dispute, in which case the court will usually make a final order in the terms of agreement. And that's where mediation would help. Most family lawyers will point you towards mediation prior to going to court. And fourth, this is perhaps sadly of the most sad outcome of all four, but can still occur, and that's that the parents keep litigating each other for so long that the children in question actually grow up and are adults by the end of it. What you'll find in a courtroom is that both parents will tell the judge empathetically and with great confidence that the children want to live with him or her. And both parents may actually be telling the truth, because that is what the child or the children may have told them separately. But children want to be loved, and they do not want to disappoint either parent. So they'll often tell them what they want to hear. And what else would you expect from a child who is caught in this toxic tug of war? So when a judge is confronted in such a situation, if particularly there's more than one child involved, the judge may say to them, which child as an adult do you love the most? And almost all the time, the adult will say, I can't decide. So then the judge can use some kind of psychological guilt trip in here, saying, if you're a fully mature adult and can't decide, why do you think it's fair to your children to choose between the both of you? And following on with a separation, sadly, parents may try to involve the children to take sides and badmouth the other partner, and encouraging them to dislike or disrespect the other parent, bribing, manipulating, and emotionally blackmailing their children into expressing a preference for one parent over the other. This is one of the most immature and cruel things that a parent can do, because it places the child in a no-win conflict of loyalties situation. And the book mentions an example of a child who actually repeats verbatim to a social worker what one parent had said, and then sits with a smile and says, my mum will be proud of me because that's exactly what she told me to tell you. And this argues that that's actually a form of child abuse, attempting to mind wash a child. And I personally completely agree with that point. Children shouldn't have to decide, particularly when they're young. If a child says they don't want to go to school, you don't let the child not go to school. The child has to go to school anyway. So bear in mind that if a child said they wanted one thing or the other, it may actually be that their opinion, they're still too young to make an opinion. Let's talk about parenting skills. And this is actually a major factor determining actually what's in the child's best interest, because it's the parenting skills of each parent who is potentially claiming custody. And there's a wide range of skills that children actually need from parents, and that could be to exercise, everything from basic caregiving skills, feeding, bathing, changing the nappies, making sure children get enough sleep, to organisational skills, getting to and from school, making sure that homework is completed, meeting the children's or the child's healthcare needs, socialisation skills, ensuring that they're receiving that intellectual support, stimulation, social stimulation, and also community involvement through extracurricular activities. And the court will actually be comparing parents' abilities to give each child the safest, healthiest and happiest childhood possible. And there's no hard and fast rule actually prohibiting a partner who has committed partner abuse from having a relationship with his or her children. Because as hard as it may be to accept, the fact that a person has been abusive towards their ex-partner, they still could be a good parent, particularly if the parties have then subsequently separated and the stresses of living in an unhappy relationship are then over. Because remember, there's two sides to every story. Most of you will have your own version of what happened in the relationship, and often everybody will firmly believe that their version is correct, and each side might identify themselves as a victim. And if you've actually got the victim mindset, you may wish to address that, because that isn't the way to get self-improvement. However, if you can find a way to try and blame another person, it does not solve your problems, and at the end of the day it doesn't change each other. You cannot change each other, particularly if you try to change them before separating, because you can have an ex-partner, but you will never be an ex-parent, and that's important to end on. So if you truly accept that your children are innocent and bear no responsibility for your separation, then you know that they are entitled to be part of a family and have their parents behave like family members even though they live apart.